because my social media has just been outgoing only. So I broadcast messages, whether it's um, town events coming up, Ramadan, Easter, Christmas greetings, flag raisings. I'll be outgoing, and then I don't really respond to anything, good or bad, right? If you just respond to the good, not the bad, then that's not very productive either. But I'm pretty consistent of just if you want to connect with me, call, email, or you'll see me around, my kids' school, the community center, and I've just been fortunate that that has worked for my constituency.
Welcome to the Cross Border Interviews, the show where we dive into the insights of municipal political leaders from across Canada. Now, our mission on this show is quite simple. It is to shine a light on the dedicated individuals who day in and day out work around the council table to shape the communities that we call home. And for today's episode, we are sitting down and chatting with Ajax Regional Councillor Sterling Lee. In the heart of Durham Region, the town of Ajax is a progressive, diverse, and vibrant waterfront community. The name Ajax was chosen to honor one of the three ships that in 1939 had engaged and routed the German battleship Graf Spee at the Battle of River Plate near Uruguay. Today, the unique history lives on in many forms. All around Ajax, you'll find reminders of the town's early beginnings, historic sites, and landmarks, each with unique stories of times long ago. Ajax is a unique place where people, nature, and history connect, and Ajax Council and staff welcome you to experience all that they have to offer. In the heart of every thriving community lies a well-crafted strategic plan. But crafting such a plan requires expertise, experience, and a deep understanding of local needs. Enter Strategic Steps, your partner in municipal strategic planning. Strategic Steps' team of experts have years of experience in municipal administration. At Strategic Steps, they just don't develop plans. They co-create homegrown strategies tailored to your unique community. They listen, they collaborate, they empower your community to thrive. Contact Strategic Steps today and take the first step towards a brighter future for your municipality. Call Strategic Steps at 780-416-9255 or visit strategicsteps.ca to get started. Regional Councillor Lee, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about yourself and talking about the great community of the town of Ajax, Ontario. Just a hop, skip, and jump from where I grew up in Clarington. So I'm so happy that you were able to sit down with me and talk about your great community and yourself. And I want to start there. I want to get to know the man behind the persona a little bit and get to ask the simple question, where did your sense of duty to serve your community come from, Sterling?
It's one of those things where, well, first things first, Chris, thanks for having me on. This was a super cool meeting. Yeah, I love everything your podcast does. During COVID, I had a podcast for like a year and a half, and just like it takes so much work. Like people don't see the behind the scenes stuff of like all the editing and all this getting guests. And so I respect that you've gone so far with this, and you have huge viewership too. So thank you very much for having me on. I think my sense of duty, I guess, was always there. Like I don't. It's a very tough question because like I always knew that I was meant to do something kind of special. I wasn't meant to be a lawyer or an accountant or a doctor. Those are very special jobs, don't get me wrong, but I have the gift of speaking, I think. Much to my parents' chagrin, by the way. I think they would have preferred me to become a lawyer, a doctor, or an accountant. Yet here I am. And so I always knew I was a good speaker, but I think as with anyone, getting into politics is I'm sure you have so many different stories of people who were born into it. Oh, my father's father was the mayor, or oh, I just lucked into it. I'm of the side of I just very much lucked into it. I was always interested in politics. And then I took a second city class in Toronto. I took an improv class, and that is where I met MP Mark Holland, who at the time was not an MP. So Mark Holland, very recently, the Minister of Health, he's since retired from politics. But at the time, he had lost the 2010 federal election. And so we both took improv classes just randomly um, on a Tuesday in the second city. And I got to know him, and again, he was a funny dude, and so that's all that mattered to me. And then at one point, I asked him, what do you do? He's like, oh, I'm the executive director for the Heart and Stroke, but I used to be a politician. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then just randomly, I Wikipedia'd him, and he actually has like a full Wikipedia entry, not like a one paragraph, but like all those things. And I was like, hey man, like you were kind of important. And he was like, yeah, like all modesty aside, I was a pretty big liberal MP. And I was like, oh my God, that's hilarious. So we became very fast friends. And then he said to me, I'm gonna run again in 2015. And I said, great, how can I help? And so he was like, well, do you want to knock on doors for me? And I said, sure. So at the time, I was working for Microsoft in Mississauga. So I used to live in Toronto. So Toronto to Mississauga is about 40 kilometers, Mississauga to Ajax, almost 80 kilometers. And I did that like every day for about 8 months. And again, it wasn't anything like I didn't have a kid at the time. I wasn't even engaged at the time. This was just a way for me to help my friend. But like hard work pays off. And he was like, hey, like, he won, and he said to me, we appreciate your loyalty, appreciate your hard work. These are two tenants that would make a good, political staffer. Do you want to work on my staff? And I don't know, did you ever watch The West Wing, Chris?
Yep.
Yeah, The West Wing was a huge show for me. Like it was just, I was like, oh my God, political staffer. I get to be like, Rob Lowe on, walking through the halls, walking and
Why
talking. So I was
why
like,
does
yeah,
why does everyone be Rob Lowe when we all know at the end of the day we're all Josh Lyman and we're
of
all
course, of
Bradley
course.
Whitford going
Because
through
Rob Lowe is
mental
so pretty.
crisis every
He's
five
so pretty.
minutes?
That's why. He's so smooth talking and pretty. But no, like that's what I envisioned. And it was much less sexy than that, as I assure you. But I became his kind of like his stakeholder relations person. I became his my official title was, the senior advisor to the MP. And what that meant was, in Ajax and Durham Region, because he was parliamentary secretary, then minister, I got to represent Mark when Mark was not available. So
Yeah.
that's in Toronto, anywhere in the GTA. And I got to meet just a lot of great people and influential people. And I got to be pretty good at my job. Like I said, I enjoy speaking. That thing of stage fright or embarrassment, I just like genetically don't have it, and I don't know why. And it's served me very well. So after about 3 years, he said, "Hey, like I can't really teach you anymore. You really can't move up anymore unless you want to move to Ottawa. Why don't you run for local council?" And just through a confluence of events, there was a regional council position open. So I skipped that first step. We're a two-tier municipality, so we have a regional council and a local council. Typically, your entry into politics is local council first. But I felt, my 3 years of political experience, I knew a few things about a few things. So I went straight to regional, won my first election, and then I've been doing that for the past, I guess, 7 years now. And it's been uh, a dream come true to be able to what the old adage is about do what you love and you don't work a day in your life. And I literally do what I love. Like being able to represent people. You always hear politicians say, "Oh, it's such an honor." But like I truly like do not take this for granted at all. Like I understand how rare this opportunity is, how like Chris, if I had taken any other day of Second City, if I had taken a Wednesday instead of that Tuesday class, I would not be here today. So
Yeah.
like again, whether you believe in fate or destiny, I kind of feel there was a fate of me meeting Mark. Mark's one of my closest friends now. He was a groomsman at my wedding. Like it was just I love the guy and he just taught me so much and now I'm able to apply a lot of that as well as my own kind of twist on things into politics and that's been really cool for me.
So
So I
correct me if
think
I'm
that
wrong.
answers the question.
It does, but it opens up two lines of questions that I want to start here because this is how much of a nerd I kind of am. Mark Holland had municipal experience before getting involved.
Yeah.
So how much did you lean on him prior to entering into that 2018 regional councillor race in Ajax to say, okay, I've learned as much as I can from you from a federal level, but federal and municipal politics, as much as they look the same because they're all politicians, they are completely unique beasts in itself. So, did prior to entering, did you chat with Mark and say, what's the one piece of advice you could give me? Because you don't just randomly wake up one day and say, okay, I'm going to take his advice, I'm going to run, and I'm going to just do this nonchalantly. Because I've talked to many people, unless you're different, you don't
No.
do that.
I mean, I still do. I have so much imposter syndrome sometimes. I'm just like, oh, I don't belong here. People are gonna figure out like I'm a big phony. And I kept asking him. I was like, hey man, I know you're my friend. You're gonna big me up because that's what friends do. But like, be honest. Do you
Yeah.
think I'm good for this role? Like, do you honestly think I can do this? And he repeatedly said, stop asking. Like, yes, I wouldn't put you up. You're my friend. So because you're my friend, I'm not gonna put you in a position where you're gonna fail. So it's like, I know you have the skill set to do this. And quite honestly, he let me figure out the role for myself. If I had a question, I'd ask him. But the one thing he did teach me was just like municipal politics, as with all politics, although it is different on different levels, it's all about just relationships and how you connect and deal with people, right? It's just people connections. And yes, you may have different points of view, political or religious or whatever, but just like there's common ground more often than not. So can you find that common ground with people you don't agree with politically or whatever? And especially municipally, there's I mean, I guess out east where we are in Ontario, there's no party-based system for municipal politics. So I was able to just be Mark's friend, yes, a liberal supporter, but also just like I was able to kind of pave my own way. And so he was just great of just reminding me of that. This story I shared on the Town of Ajax podcast, which we just introduced this year, was my first year. What he did teach me was to be authentic because I remember my first year, I kept trying to speak like Mark Holland. So you hear the way I'm speaking now, it's very casual, very this is who I am. That first year at events, I'd be like, ladies and gentlemen, my name is I affected my voice like a weirdo. So he was like, "What are you doing, man?" He's like, "You don't speak like that. Like, why are you trying to do this?" And I was a little embarrassed. I was like, I guess I was trying to speak like you. He was like, yeah, don't like just be you.
Yeah.
And he reminded me, like when I knocked on doors, my first election and second, like they met me. Like you can't really fake who you are. And he's like, that's who they voted for. So be that person. Be
Well,
authentic. Just be the best version of yourself.
Well, especially at the municipal level, people can tell when you're faking it at the municipal level compared to provincial and federal, in my opinion alone, because municipally, you are the government of proximity, as the former
Right.
president would say. You're the ones who actually know the people in your communities a lot more than your MP or your MPP. So when you're in that role of trying to be authentic, is it hard because you want the best for all your community, but sometimes you have to play a little bit of an imposter to make sure people feel like they're being heard. And sometimes being authentic Sterling and being sort of politician Sterling can differ. And how do you make sure those two don't differ too much? So that way, one person saying, that's not the Sterling I know, that this is the Sterling I know. How do those two match up in the regional council purview?
I've leaned into just being my authentic self.
Is it
And really
hard?
like no, like it was at first because you're worried. Oh my God, like what if I'm perceived as unprofessional? I started wearing Jordans, just very simply, like different shoes. I wasn't wearing dress shoes. I was wearing jeans, a vest, dress shirt, and Jordans because I think they're more comfortable than leather dress shoes. And I'm a bit younger, and that's kind of the style, so to speak. And yeah, I got a little crapped on the first few months, but soon people crapped on by my, I would say, peers, but the public that actually they responded to that. They're like, "Oh my God, love your kicks. Those are amazing. Oh, I love your J's." And I started getting just like it really connected me more. And same as my sense of humor. Like for me, the most important facet of me is just I love just joking. It's why I was in the second city. So yeah, I think people, especially in this scary political time, like a politicians who can laugh at themselves and just have a genuine sense of humor. It's what we would want in our personal lives. Why wouldn't we want that from our elected representatives? I mean, I'm still able to do my job. I still, do my homework, so to speak. I speak well at council, but just in that, I will be more lighthearted, and I think people respond to that. So yeah, it was hard early on, but I find now it's just who I am. I think the hardest part, if I'm being honest, is I'm probably a lot more crass in my personal life than I am professionally. But like in these 7 years, I have not slipped up with swear words or anything silly like that. So far so good.
So while humor is a great tool to utilize and authenticity is a great tool to utilize, you've had to make some very tough decisions around those two council tables, whether being at the region, Durham region, or at the Town of Ajax council tables. And I can imagine, and I'm saying this with experience, speaking to over about 400 municipal leaders from coast to coast to coast, that those decisions are not universally loved and admired by every single person in your community. And there are days that you can't be jovial and happy, and sometimes you have to be a little bit more serious. How do you make those tough decisions knowing that not 100% of the people are going to be behind you every single step of the way? Because sometimes you have to make the tough choices, and that is going to mean someone's property taxes are going to go up, pools are going to have to reduce hours, just changes and challenges that municipalities face on a day-to-day basis. You dictate them as a one member of your council. Majority needs to pass. I'm not sure if Ajax has strong mayor power, so we could just
We
go into
do.
that. Okay, so you have strong mayor
Yeah.
power, so that could so a majority does not need to pass everything, and I say that respectfully to the mayors who use strong mayor powers. But how do you make those tough decisions at the end of the day, knowing that people are not always going to be on side with you?
We moved to Ajax back in late 2015, early 2016. So, I'm able to view this municipality, which is pretty built out, by the way. It's not very large, geographically. We have about 137,000 people. So it's pretty built out. And you're able to kind of see a lot of the decisions that were made in planning, in your kind of like, development. And, my wife and I always talk, we're just like, oh, why is this built this way? Especially coming from the big metropolis of Toronto, you're kind of seeing, yeah, there was like a lot of decisions I would not have made if I were the council at the time. So I approach it with, you read your agendas, you ask the questions at council, you make the best decision with the information you have at the time possible. Looking not just at the present, because again, I think the hardest thing to do as a politician is to always work to your next election. So it's like I can make all the popular decisions now and guarantee my reelection, or I can make some hard decisions which guarantee a better town. And I don't know, I because I lucked into this, and I truly view that I lucked into this. Everything is just on the house money, so to speak, where I'm very free of just like if I don't get reelected, then so be it. That's the decision of the electorate. I'll be able to look at my kid in the eye, my kid's 7 now, and say, hey, this town that we live in, these decisions I made because of this XYZ. And I made the best decision possible. And hopefully they'll see the benefits of it. Yeah. And I think one of the key things for me is I generally stay off social media now. I think that has really helped my decision-making process. I think social media is the worst of people sometimes. It's a very curious generational thing where it's just like I see Gen X and boomers, and some millennials use Facebook, some use Twitter. I think Gen Z and early or later Gen Y is using Instagram. Like just the communication tools and the feedback you get. I think Facebook right now has become a really toxic environment for elected officials, and it's making the minority opinion seem like the majority, whether it's development, whether it's in, traffic calming or anything like that. So I try and stay off social media. I read the facts. I listen to the staff who are experts in their field, so to speak, and then you just try and make the right decision. And you're right, it's not always easy, but
Can I
if
play
there's one
devil's
thing I've
advocate with
learned,
you?
yeah, please.
Okay, and I'm gonna be this. This is not a question I ask. This is not a question just for you. I've asked it to many different people. Um, you're right. Social media is a place where people go and they vent their frustrations anonymously and sometimes not anonymously. But, and I think you come to the realization, social media is also a tool where people feel like they can connect with their local politicians because there's more likely than not that they probably feel like they don't see you every single day, and that's the only way that they know they can get a hold of you. They can send
Right.
their emails, they can phone you, but at the end of the day, they send you a Facebook message. They feel like they're being at least looked at, and if you don't respond, then at least they say, we gave you their opinion. How do you balance that? Because you can't just ignore the people on social media by saying your opinion doesn't matter, your voices don't matter, the minority voices who think they're the majority voices don't matter because you're elected to represent everyone, not just the people who voted for you.
So I'm I don't know whether you consider it fortunate, not fortunate. I think it just is. The ward I'm in is North Ajax, and North Ajax is the newer developments. Pretty much all the new developments for the past 15, 20 years were North Ajax. We have a ton of new families.
Yeah.
People very much like me, millennials, had their first one or two kids moving in. And I find that, again, I speak for myself as a new parent. Um, Parenting is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And I respect all parents, single parents, nuclear family, it doesn't matter. Like parenting is difficult. I think a lot of my constituency is very busy with their own lives that they actually don't pursue social media too much.
Okay.
And because my social media has just been outgoing only. So I broadcast messages, whether it's town events coming up, Ramadan, Easter, Christmas greetings, flag raisings. I'll be outgoing, and then I don't really respond to anything, good or bad, right? If you just respond to the good, not the bad, then that's not very productive either. But I'm pretty consistent of just if you want to connect with me, call, email, or you'll see me around, my kids' school, the community center, and I've just been fortunate that that has worked for my constituency. Now, I know there are certain municipalities, their elections are always at large. So it's like it's the whole municipality. Mine's not. Mine is
Yeah.
newer Ajax, where they don't really rely on your traditional social media to connect, nor do they have the time to connect.
Do you listen to both sides of the equation?
I do. So,
How
I'm
important
pretty,
how important is it for yourself to listen to both sides? Because when you walk into that council chambers, either the regional council chambers or the town council chambers, and I would assume, and I hate to assume on the show, but I do it on a regular basis that I should just not say I shouldn't assume, but I should assume that you don't make up your mind until you sit down in that seat and you hear the final report delivered and the motion presented to make that decision on what's best for the community, whether it be planning, whether
yeah.
it be X, Y, or Z. You're not supposed to make up your mind. I say that. How important is it to keep that open mind? Because sometimes, and we all have our own internal biases of what we believe is right and how we believe things should be, but you have to be open in the role of counsel to potentially change your mind last minute because other views could sway you, right?
I think I'm actually, if I do have a reputation on council is that I do generally have a pretty open mind. I'm one of the more, socially progressive counselors, I would say in the region. I'm not saying the most, but just I generally lean towards social progressiveness. And so in Ajax, we had a bylaw amendment to allow for a tourist gun range to be in the municipality. It was maybe, I think it was like 50, 200 meters from residential, walking distance to a school. And, guns, I'm sure whether you've covered it or not, is a pretty hot topic regardless. And generally, I'm more on the side of, hey, we probably need more gun control, not less, uh, regardless of legal, illegal firearms. So that's generally my point of view. So going in, I imagined I was not going to support the gun range. And then, the proponent had a very detailed explanation of all the safeguards they were in. The community came out explaining, the difference between, legal guns, illegal guns, the rules of licensing and everything. And by the end of it, I said, yeah, let's support this. This is a good tourist. Like there was no reason for me not to. And I think I surprised myself and a lot of council members and I supported it. But it's just that it was the fair thing to do. Like, according to our laws, that is legal to have a legal gun and there's rules around it. And I can't just let the um, fear of the possible interfere with my ability to legislate. I always say you can always play the what if game on anything, and there's no scenario you can't come up with that's going to be like doom everything, right? What if, and then you can always think of something. So generally, I have to be as level-minded as possible. And in this case, it made sense to put a gun range in the town of Ajax.
Interesting. I want to turn to about the personal life of a counselor because there are days where I can imagine you just want to go outside your house and just be Sterling. But the moment you leave your house with your wife, with your child, you are regional counselor. You are a counselor, and that means if you get stopped, that means you're probably going to be taking about a 20-minute conversation about a certain topic. Have you been able to strike that work-life balance? Because when I speak to newly elected leaders from across Canada, that is the one thing that they have a hard time trying to find is how do I become mom and dad, or how do I become spouse to my partner while also doing this job? Because for some, it's not a part-time job where you can just go to the meetings. It is a full-time job, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. There is no off time because you have to be going, going, going. Have you been able to strike that balance?
Well, I think my biggest publicist is probably my kid. Like he'll always just again be, oh, my daddy's the deputy mayor, my daddy's the regional councillor of Ajax. Like, and I get it. So it's like his whole class knows and defunct the parents know. So I think, like it's I'll get very strange questions at very strange times, like a pickup and drop off for my kid at school. Parents will stop me and ask me about trash cans and everything. And but for the most part, like again, I'm very blessed to have a really cool ward that understands like boundaries. No one's ever my address was I always publicize it during elections. It's a choice whether you want to or not. I don't care. And no one's never knocked on my door being like, I'm so mad at you, like I'm on my community, just my subdivision Facebook group, and no one says, oh, Sterling, you. So I think it's pretty balanced there. I think the harder part is just the time aspect, which you mentioned. And that pretty much, I had a very long discussion with my wife before I even contemplated running for politics. Because unfortunately, in this field, you see so many divorcees, and, I'm sure there's other reasons, but I imagine the job and the life of this job had a big impact on that. And so, I make sure to carve out time with my family. And I now understand that I don't have to go to every event that is presented to me. I mean, I go to as many as I humanly can, but sometimes it's okay to say, no, I'm going to spend time with my family. And I've said that to organizers, and they're pretty understanding. They're like, yeah, family comes first. So if I have to leave to tuck my kid in, they're like, yeah, we were parents too. We understand. So again, it goes back to just being authentic, honest, and just being true to yourself. And, my ward knows my family's my priority, and they've been very accepting of that.
I should have asked this a little bit earlier on, but you mentioned when they do approach you to talk to you about like in the school lineup or drop-off lineup, how often are you finding people talking about non-municipal jurisdictional issues? Because I get a sense in this country that people truly don't understand what level of government does what. And I say that respectfully, knowing that I've had many conversations with my own family, and they say the municipality deals with this. I'm like, no, that's a provincial educational matter. So you go talk to your school board trustee or you go talk to your provincial MPP. But from a municipal standpoint, do you get those provincial and federal questions? And how do you tell people it's not your jurisdiction without telling them it's not your jurisdiction? Because they've come to you because they probably know you a little bit better than they know their MP or their
Yeah.
MPP.
Yeah, I get that all the time. And it's,
Is
I
it
don't know.
because
This
your
is,
background? Because you did work with Mark Holland beforehand, so they're like, "Oh, you know Mark, so you're
yes.
probably going to be able to chat with Mark."
Well, I got that a lot of just like, oh, you dealt my, CRA case. I remember your name. And it's like, oh, my roles changed. But I also think, again, this is an indictment of the Canadian education system where, it seems in this United States, they know the three levels of government and, the checks and balances. Yeah, for some reason, we can't separate the three yet. And that's fine. It's, I always hear them out. Yeah, if someone's complaining about schools, I'll hear the whole thing because sometimes they start with schools, but the issue is that, oh, the drop off in front of the school is not being policed very well, in which case that goes to almost to a bylaw issue as opposed to
Yeah.
an actual school issue. So the key thing is just listening. And I can't stress enough. This is the weirdest time to be a politician. And I always say pre-COVID, post-COVID was kind of like the barometer where I think during COVID, everyone just got really frustrated and angry and didn't know how to release that anger. And so they just want to be heard. They want to just feel that empathy. And I like doing that. I just like talking to people. So that's not a hard part of it. Um, and then I explained to them very quickly, hey, I hear what you're saying. This is actually not my jurisdiction. I'm going to connect you. And then, I'll send a quick email to the MPP or the MP, and then they're generally taken off into pretty good hands.
Okay, thank you for answering that before we turn to the town of Ajax as a whole. And I want to talk about the town of Ajax, but also Durham region, because you represent both as regional councillor, as deputy mayor, as regional councillor for the town of Ajax. It's kind of a three-prong statement I have to say here, but I'm going to try and say it as quickly as possible. For those who have listened to this beforehand, I apologize, but I need to make sure this is on the record. This is a conversation between the regional council, the deputy mayor, and myself. This is not a motion of council, not a policy of council, not a direction of council. This is his opinion and his opinion alone. Now, what they talk about may line up with what's going on at the town of Ajax and the Durham region, but at the end of the day, it's still his opinion. He needs a majority of people to vote for something, to pass any motion, to direct administration to do anything. So, what he's talking about is not a motion of council. It is his opinion. For those who are about to send emails, please send them to me and I will file them away in the appropriate location. With that being said, regional
You've said that
councillor,
before. You've said that a few times, I imagine.
I've said that about 380 times already, and God bless it, I'll say it about
Yeah,
380 more. Um, Regional councillor, deputy mayor, in your opinion, and I'm going to start with the town first, then we'll move to the Durham region. What
sure.
do you see as the biggest challenge facing the town of Ajax today, as of recording this in the middle of April 2025?
Intensification.
What do you mean?
Yeah. So Toronto, everyone pictures Toronto, it's those skyscrapers and the large towers, and then you think of the kind of the suburbs surrounding Toronto. The suburbs kind of grew out, and Durham region, we used to call it the GTA, now it's called the GTHA. So pretty much from Hamilton to like Oshawa is considered the
Whoa,
Greater
whoa, whoa,
Toronto
whoa.
area.
Willie Woo, Granville Anderson,
Sorry,
Adrian
oh my
Foster
God,
are
yes.
all going to complain that you
Oh my
forgot
God.
Clarence.
That's so funny. And by the way, oh my God, Clarendon, excuse me. Clarendon to like Hamilton is like the GTA that, oh my God, I'm gonna hear that. You're 100% right. And it's just as you went away from Toronto, developers, towns focus on, oh, here's your, detached home, white picket fence, and you're kind of away from the bustle, but can still access, all your city services. What they didn't anticipate was that, oh, like, connecting services to these detached houses becomes more expensive now. Connecting a water line, connecting transit. Transit in Toronto is easy. I can move a bus from three condos off one block, and that's like, 1,800 people versus a subdivision, which is like I have to walk 600, up to a kilometer to a bus stop and then move maybe 40 people. There's a cost to that. And so, you know, it's no surprise to anyone. We're in a housing crisis because what the suburbs did was we didn't look to intensification. We only built detached, semi-detached, or towns. Now, since 2019, 2020, we're playing catch up now. And so, we're having to intensify really quickly. Um, and our residents who've grown accustomed to this idea of this idyllic neighborhood of, oh, I have a yard and a white picket fence, like that reality is not becoming feasible anymore, especially if the municipality wants to intensify and bring more people in. And again, it's not even bring more people in. The people are there. They are going to come to whichever municipality can support them, and we need to build the infrastructure to support them. And that's just smart city building. So we went again from detached, semi-detached towns to 3 years ago we approved our first 60-story tower in our downtown core. And 60 stories, like, I just want to put this in context, like that's taller than anything in Paris, France right now. That'd be currently, if it was built tomorrow, the 20th tallest structure in Canada. And we have to approve that because people are here and we have to provide housing for them. That is our job as a municipality. So it's very jarring to fight the people, whether you call them NIMBYs, whatever, the people who just want their idyllic neighborhood, and seeing these intensifications happen, it's hard to sell them on it. But we have official plans, we have regional official plans, we have provincial legislation saying that this is okay. So our message back to our residents is, I get you want to fight this, but you're not going to win this fight. The province has made a decision, the towns have to follow it, and we need to intensify.
I think I remember following that story because I believe, and this is how much of knowledge I have in my head because this is the type of nerd. I think, if I'm not mistaken, your mayor used the very first strong mayor powers
Yeah,
around a building permit
yeah,
around that because it was such a controversial moment. So how do you balance? Because if I'm not mistaken, it's at the south end of the community as well. It's like
yep.
almost near the go
Right
train
by the GO
station.
station. Yeah,
Go right near the go station. This is throwing back me a few years ago. Wow.
for sure.
Um, how do you build up without changing the view of what Ajax has become known as? Because you read on your website, the town of Ajax, it is a progressive, it's a vibrant community surrounded by nature. But when you start building up and start becoming the sort of, and I hate to use this, and I apologize for those who are listening from Ajax. I'm not trying to mean any disrespect by this statement, but the suburb of Toronto, because as Toronto grows, people start moving outwards, and then it sort of starts to amalgamate into one bigger metropolitan area. Because I remember going from Newcastle, where I was lived, to Toronto on the GO train, and I remember seeing like visible like spots where one town ended, like the city of Oshawa, the city of Whitby, the town of Ajax. But now you go and everyone's bought up. How do you build up without changing who Ajax is?
I think the first thing you have to do is reject the premise that whatever a town was is what it always has to be. Like we have to evolve, you know? And again, it's the arguments of, oh, should we ever take these statues down? Oh, it's a part of history. And it'll always be a part of history. But what rule says this has to be your identity forever? Like that's not progress. That's not the world we live in. And I refuse again because I have the lens of being a younger counselor, new kid of just like um holding on to this fantasy for a few folks and then holding back progress.
Yeah.
That is so counterintuitive for me. So number one is fighting that. Number two, in the case of this 60 story and other 60-story developments, they're kind of in areas that actually we're very fortunate don't have a lot of residential right by them. So it is kind of in our kind of like commercial area. There's like, stores and shops and whatnot. And so it does make sense to put it there. I think over the next few decades, every town, smaller town, mid-sized town, you're going to hear about wanting to invest in your downtown core, create a downtown. Because, you lived in Newcastle, I live in Ajax. There's nothing to do in Durham region sometimes, and it's so frustrating. Like I had to go to Second City to get improv classes from, world-class improvisers. You didn't have that in Durham region. We don't have a theater scene in Durham region. I have to go to Toronto, and I thank goodness they have a great theater scene there. But I always use the example of Hamilton and I'm going to give my flowers to Hamilton. Hamilton, I went to Wilfrid Laurier in around the 2000s, and we used to joke at the people from Hamilton. We used to be like, "Oh, the smokestacks, you can't even breathe." And then what Hamilton did was they built an art scene. They built a hip art scene. And now, like outside of Toronto, Hamilton's the go-to place for bands, music, live theater. Like that's what we need. But before that, you kind of have to kind of create the infrastructure, which includes these towers, which includes these kind of spaces for the arts. So I think it's hand in hand. And yeah, I appreciate some people just want a small town by the lake, but we can't stop progress because of a decision you made 50 years ago.
But, and again, playing a little bit devil's advocate with you, but I think you're ready for this question. How do you build on that progress without doing it on the backs of the people who live there right now? Because um, as much as the municipalities aren't in the world of actually building those apartment stories, those 60-story apartment complexes, you are in the business of building the infrastructure that needs to go there. And this is sort of a double-edged question because you're also regional councillor, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, what water and wastewater comes from regional council.
Yep.
And then, so how does Ajax fare in that expansion without doing it on the backs of the people? Because if you're not prepared for the growth today, you can't come in and say we're going to build 4 60-story complexes to bring in people when you don't have the infrastructure in place already to do that. Do you feel like Ajax is set up and Durham Region is set up to grow sustainably but not do it where people are seeing a 10 to 15%, or in one case, one municipality in Western Canada, the 39% tax increase because they needed upgrades to address all the shortfalls that they had forgotten about.
So that's a very huge question. I'm going to break it down into chunks. So I
I love
think,
asking the huge questions on this
yeah.
show.
So your first thing was just like, on the backs of, um, it's a chicken and egg argument. We hear it a lot. How can you improve 60 stories when you don't have schools, when you don't have transit? And I guess the inverse becomes true, where we can't build those transit corridors and those active transit areas until you build the towers. We can't build the school until you build the case that we have the students for the school. So I understand the concern, but that's not how city planning works. And by the way, before this job, I would have assumed that's what you have to do is you build all the transit first and then you start putting things. But of course that doesn't work like that because at the end of the day, the development charges from those buildings help build the sewer, transit, and schools that you need. So it is like you kind of need the development first, and that leads to all these other development infrastructure is the word I'm looking for. The second part of your question was, do you remind me?
Wastewater treatment facilities. Do you feel like the region of Durham is prepared for that
Yes.
influx of growth? Because while the town has to look after what the town has to address, but the region has to play a part in
Ah,
that as well.
you mentioned funding as well, because
Yes,
it's true. Um, I don't know about other provinces. I can talk about Ontario, and
that's
this
why we're
isn't
talking about the Ontario
yeah,
municipality. So go ahead.
this isn't an indictment on but it's just like you're gonna hear it a lot. We've been downloaded a lot of services that were once onto, and again, I'm sure everyone's spoken about it, where it's just like homelessness was never really like a municipal focus. That should be a provincial, healthcare should not be a municipal focus. That should be the province. But now, if we want to upgrade a hospital like we do in Uxbridge, the region has to front $10 million. And for me, I'm always just like, but that wasn't the deal. Like, granted, the province can always change the municipal act and make it our deal, but it's easy for them to get reelected saying we'll keep your taxes low when you keep giving other branches of government the responsibilities that you should be in charge of, because inevitably that leads to the increases you're talking about. Do we have the sewer and all the infrastructure, or can we have it? Absolutely. That's what development journals are for. That's what
Yeah.
we pay our planners and all these department heads, these experts in their respective fields to build for us and find solutions. But we now have to start thinking about all these other expensive big ticket items. Homelessness has become such an issue so quickly in our municipality's case. But I think in other municipalities, they're seeing the same thing. And COVID absolutely did not help it. But we went from 2018, when I first started, we had maybe 25 identified unsheltered individuals, 25. We are now in 2025, upwards of 200 to 300 in that short amount of time. And the province has not stepped up. The federal government has not stepped up because on the Fed side, we're seeing asylum seekers, and it is our responsibility to help these people. I refuse to say, oh, it's a Toronto problem, because wherever the asylum seeker lands, then that they are our responsibility. But at the same time, though, we need um, financial support and political support to build and house these people that we don't have. So now we have to spend money that was allocated for a sewer in 2026 to the unsheltered population and asylum seekers in 2025. And then we have to wait for that money. So there is a trickle down for responsibilities that municipalities have taken on, because again, it is the right thing to do. We're not just going to turn people away. Otherwise, you're just making it another municipality's issue. But at the same time, though, we made it very clear, like there's, a mental health epidemic, there's a drug epidemic right now, and I'm not being an alarmist. I'm not saying anything that you won't hear from a lot of people. And I really think we need a strategy. Whether we copy whatever they're doing in Europe that may or may not work, or Japan, we need a strategy for this country. Otherwise, what you have is not just 10 provinces and territories doing different things for our homeless. We have, you know, 200 plus municipalities doing something different. And that's just not good policy, right? Someone's got to take hold of this. And
But
it's what we push the feds to do and the province to do.
while the province is downloading, and it's not just an Ontario thing, it is a cross-country thing that I'm hearing about. Um, the one aspect we often forget to talk about when we talk about the mental health and addictions and houselessness challenges that we're facing is the resident buy-in from the community. Because the municipality needs to bring this forward, but if you don't have buy-in from the community to say we need to help address this and we need to come together as not just governments, but governments, stakeholder, non-government organizations, nonprofit organizations, volunteer groups to come together and help solve these issues together. Because governments cannot solve this issue together by themselves. I'm going to be the one to say that. I'm going to say it over and over again because I think residents need to buy in as well. Do you get a sense in Ajax that people are willing to say, let's try and solve this together instead of just the government doing it on their own?
I see shades of it.
Okay.
You know, I think there are certain individuals who view our unhoused as someone's, mother, father,
Uh,
son, daughter, relative, someone who's in need of help. And then there's others who just see some, for lack of a better phrase, a vagrant in a bus stop who's polluting or, defecating and making it difficult to go to the bank because they're in the stalls and whatnot. There is that dichotomy. But I've seen this country come together like never before on tariffs and buy Canada first, elbows up. We all came together because on every level of government, we spoke with one voice saying this is what needs to be done. So if we decide now that the unhoused becomes our next priority, then I think if we're saying in one collective voice that let's fix this issue as best as we can, then that will automatically get people buy-in. They'll get people excited of helping these individuals who are in desperate need of help. It's always funny on Bell Let's Talk Day. What is it? It's okay not to be okay. We hold up these signs, we send hashtags, we pat ourselves on the back. But then we have individuals who truly have addiction issues. And we say, why are you in our libraries? Get out. Like, you're making it unsafe. And I'm just like, what happened to all that messaging that we said the last Wednesday of January? And now, like, we can't speak at both sides of our mouths. And I think what we need is truly a national strategy to bring all the pieces together. Let's go elbows up now on our unhoused situation. Let's make Canada the utopia that we truly believe we can be. And I think it takes really strong leadership. It's going to take money. It's going to take resources. It's going to take education. But like, I have to believe, the will is there and the people will be right behind that.
I will hope for that as well. Now, I am
Yeah.
very cautious of time. I did not realize we're already 45 minutes into this interview, but
That
I
blew
want
by.
it did, but I still have a few questions for you, and
Yeah, let's get going.
I do want to sort of flip the original script a little bit because we all have our challenges, and I agree that every municipality has their own unique challenges, but there's also the very big macro challenges. But we all have our unique success stories, the things that we're proud of when it comes to our community. And we never often talk about those because those don't sell column inches in the media world. But I wanted to do that. What are you proud of when it comes to the town of Ajax and the Durham region? What is the thing you look at and say, you know what, we have our challenges, but we've got this going for us? What is that X factor that Ajax has?
I am one of, I was the first Chinese counselor, my colleague Lisa Bauer, she's Filipino. We're both the first East Asian counselors in Ajax history. I was the second Chinese counselor in Durham Region history because you had Willie Wu on before. Um, Apparently, I'm also the second Chinese Ontario counselor to be on your podcast. Again, after Willie Wu. Willie Wu is really eating up a lot of my publicity here. But all joking aside, our diversity, I am incredibly proud of, and it's why I moved my family here. You know, um, I grew up in very homogenous. I grew up in Markham, Ontario. Markham is very people who look like me. A lot of Chinese people in Markham. That's where they settled. And then having lived in Toronto in my 20s, I wanted somewhere where my kid could experience true multiculturalism. And Ajax has that. Um, I think there's like three white kids, or two or three white kids in his whole class of 28. And in lieu of that, he's got a ton of black friends, Tamil, Pakistani, Afghan. Like we have such a Tamil, we have such a mix, and that makes me incredibly proud because we don't have true. We have all these pockets now. Like Ajax is this safe haven for our differences, and it's really a really symbolic thing for me that 57% of our entire residents are racialized. That's awesome. And I take that very seriously because I am racialized myself. And so there's an added responsibility now to push the agenda forward and try and get that equity that everyone keeps talking about when they mention DEI. So
Yeah.
some of the things I'm personally proud of is, I've been very, I wouldn't say critical, but I've pointed it out to our police chief, our various chiefs, our police boards. We need more diversity in our police force. And now, through the past 7 years, we've hired more diverse new cadets. Then my next thing was, great. How are we promoting them now? Do we offer a mentorship program? We've now instituted a mentorship program. I've had racialized officers who have never met. They come up to me like, "Hey, you're Councillor Lee," and I'm like, "Yeah." They're just like, "Thank you so much. You have opened some doors to me and my colleagues that would not have otherwise been opened." And I don't get extra votes from those. Those people are probably don't even live in Ajax. But the fact that I'm making our police force more diverse and I shone a spotlight on that was incredibly important to me because it makes for a fairer society when your areas of power, whether it's politics, police, whatever, reflect the population. So I'll keep pushing for that. Ideally, we get to that 56% parity. That's a very ambitious goal, but I want to keep pushing for just that diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially now in a time when we have our neighbors down south who are telling me that those three words are bad words now. Those three words can remove funding. And no, I don't want that. I don't, I don't stand for that. Let us stand for DEI. Because again, you take those three words individually, diversity, equity, inclusion. You tell me individually why any of those words is wrong for society to strive towards, and you can't do it.
I agree wholeheartedly on that statement. I want to turn to my last segment, and this is my fun segment. This is the segment that I love to talk about
Yeah.
because I think every municipality has a good hidden gem in it. I think every municipality has that tourism draw that we just don't talk about. Now, traditionally, the province deals with tourism, and they talk about the big things like in Ontario would be the CNE, Niagara Falls, but I'm assuming Ajax has a few that you are proud of and you think people should come see while they're coming through Ajax. What should tourists do while they visit Ajax? And what are the hidden gems of the community that people need to see when they're in town?
So it's in South Ajax, which is not my ward, but we do have one of the largest undeveloped lake sides. So we have lakefront property that's just undeveloped. We've set up trails, we've set up walking paths, a lot of green areas, but it's just like we haven't built there. Now, I think there's an opportunity to put some restaurants and stuff like that, but for now, it's definitely a tourist destination. People just experience Lake Ontario, which is absolutely beautiful and green space and biking trails, which Ajax is known for. So that's definitely one. The next is this is an odd one because it's not so much a tourist destination, but you know, we have Grandview Kids is an area for, kids with developmental issues, whether it's physical or, mental, and it's called Grandview Kids. We opened its new headquarters in Ajax. They serve all of Durham Region, all the GTA, and it's an awesome facility that you just again, I'm a father, and so I look to this and I told you, being a father is the hardest thing I ever did. I can't even imagine the 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 struggles of parents with a kid with um nonverbal or like neurodivergent issues, how much harder that endeavor becomes because it's not like 1x, it's probably 5 6x harder. And even just finding time to go on a date night because you can't get a babysitter who has the proper skills to help with these kids. We have Grandview Kids that is helping these parents. It's an awesome community space that allows people to, bring their kids, they help them, whether it's education or just helping through their disabilities. It's just a really cool facility that I'm very proud. Ajax, we donated the land. It's brand new, so it's very much a great facility. And finally, the Audley Rec Center, which is right across the street from my house. It's just a community center, but I spend an inordinate amount of time there. I've started my workout life. I'm trying to work out more because I've grown incredibly unhealthy since COVID. So, I use the gym, the pool, the library. There's a new fairgrounds that's opening this September. So I call it the crown jewel of Ajax in terms of community centers.
Is there a spot that you like to go? I'm going to play a little Sophie's Choice with you here for a second, but where do you go to decompress after a long day of work? After council meetings, whether it be Durham Region or the Town of Ajax, is there a spot in the community you can just go and let it all just escape, knowing that tomorrow morning you're going to have to get back up and do it all over again?
I mean, normally it's my bed, if that's what you're asking, but I don't think that's what you're looking for. Um, I
More often
love
than not, that's the answer I get, though.
Yeah, it's true. I love movies. I've always loved movies. So like just the local theater, we have a Cineplex right by my house as well. Or there's a Landmark Theater in Whitby that I also go to. I just love any chance I get. My wife and I will steal a chance to see a movie. My kid's getting to an age where he can watch more fun movies now. We just saw the Minecraft movie, which was good, I guess. I don't play Minecraft. I don't get the world of Minecraft, but kids were losing their minds at the theater, so that's always a fun experience. So yeah, I just love going to the movies to decompress because I love cinema.
Well, I can tell that by, for those who are listening to this show, you're not seeing the Labyrinth poster, The Empire Strikes Back, and I believe that's a Dark Crystal
That is a Dark
post.
Crystal.
But and then also for those keen-eye observers who are watching this through any of the video channels, you'll see the
The
Iron Man
Gauntlet.
Infinity Gauntlet right behind him as well. And that's the only thing I've been noticing the entire time. We're talking about politics, and there's David Bowie looking over your shoulder.
Yeah. So anytime you want to bring me on for the non-political pop culture podcast, I am 100% down to. I love doing trivia as well. Um, I always grew up. I no, I had a very accomplished siblings, so I'm literally the dumbest person in my family. So I compensate with that by trying to be the smartest person at trivia. So I tried to get the nickname Trivia Thanos to stick. It hasn't, but I've tried anyways. Hence, I bought myself a gauntlet.
Oh, well, my final question for you, because I'm very cautious of time here, and it's an important one. It's the million-dollar question to end this interview. What makes the town of Ajax such a unique place to live, work, and raise a family?
Oh, that is a very good question, and one I should have expected and should have prepared an answer. Um, Diversity is a key one. As we keep getting more racialized families, more of the 2S LGBTQIA coming in, it's an municipality that embraces diversity. If you're different, come on in. We want you here because um, everyone else is so homogenized, and that's fine for them, but not in Ajax. We embrace our diversity. And number two is our love for the environment. You know, I before I moved here, I don't like taking walks. I'm not, that's probably why I'm so unhealthy, but I would never take a walk just for my life. But COVID, one thing good came out of COVID was my family started exploring the trails, and we have an awesome trail network, awesome bike network. Like I said, we have the lakefront. We're someone that truly embraces in the environment. And the third is and this is something I'm going to work on. I want to be like the tech capital, if not of Durham region, but like Ontario. And that's an ambitious goal. I haven't even gotten started because, again, pandemic and then tariffs, but just I would love these tech companies to see Ajax for the potential that it is. And, we have Amazon come in, we have great logistics and warehousing in Ajax. I want to expand that to more tech-focused industries. I think that's where the future is going in terms of jobs, high-paying jobs, good quality jobs, and to have all of that in one municipality, to use your phrase, it's the work, live, play lifestyle that I think is just the missing piece. So I think my goal, for as long as Ajax will keep bringing me in, is to bring a tech sector to Ajax.
Regional Councillor Trivia Thanos, I want to thank you so much for sitting down with me. But truly, Councillor Sterling, Councillor Lee, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to do this interview today. I always learn so much from the great people who come on this show, and I've learned so much about yourself and the work and the dedication that you have for the town of Ajax and the Durham region. So thank you so much.
Thanks again for having me. Honestly, it was a ton of fun, and like I said, that time flew by. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Cross Border Interviews. Now, we hope you've enjoyed today's conversation and gained some valuable insights from our guest. To stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes, don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to hit that subscribe button today. Also, if you haven't already, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Blue Skies, or over on LinkedIn. The links are in the show notes. Now, for even more content and to learn more about the stories and the people we feature on this show, visit us online at crossborderinterviews.ca. Your support means the world to us, so share this episode with your friends, your family, and help us keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll be back with a brand new episode of Cross Border Interviews soon. Till then, everyone.